watching ABC 7 News at 6:30.
We saw you checking out real estate while you're supposed to be here. Why is that?
Was that on my lunch hour?
It was all day long, Ken.
And he's not alone. He's just one of many city parks workers we caught goofing off at your expense. Good evening again. I'm Jessica Aguirre.
And I'm Dan Ashley, sitting in for Pete Wilson. The I-Team first exposed the problem of absentee gardeners in San Francisco's Recreation and Parks Department 7 years ago. We found city gardeners who weren't pulling weeds or their own weight. And when we brought it to the attention of city management, they vowed to do something about it. I-Team reporter Dan Noyes is live now to show us, Dan, the problems really have only gotten worse.
That's right, Dan. You know that the budget for the Parks Department has been slashed by about 25% over the past few years. So this is something that local officials just don't want to see. Your tax dollars being wasted. But that's exactly what we found.
The city's paying for this, and this is what it looks like.
These Dolores Park neighbors tell us they're fed up.
I come to this park almost every day. I see what's being done here, which fundamentally is nothing. I think it's a shame. As a matter of fact, I think it's a crime.
We've heard the same complaint at many parks, that city gardeners aren't working, and people who live nearby want something done about it. Neighbors at Buena Vista Park told us they rarely see some of the gardeners assigned here. They point to the waist-high weeds, graffiti, and garbage. So we followed this man with our hidden cameras and found he's actually very busy, just not at the park. Gardener Ken Bostock arrives at 7:30 and sits in his truck visiting. By 8:15, all the Buena Vista gardeners are headed for a Mission restaurant where they enjoy some downtime. At 9:30, they're back. Bostock parks in a 2-hour zone. He's not staying long. He hangs out for a while, picks up trash for about 30 minutes, and by 11 a.m., he's off. He spends the rest of the afternoon doing errands. He heads to the bank, stops at home, then visits a bar. It happens to be closed, but he leaves with something to go. Then more shopping. He fills his cart, fills up his gas tank, and hits the road. We followed as he spent the rest of his shift driving to Sebastopol.
We watched you and documented you not working. Now, you're a public servant. Is the public getting their money's worth out of your salary?
I've worked hard for 16 years for the city.
And you work every day, 8 hours a day.
I do my job here.
Historically, people feel like they can get away with doing nothing.
This gardener doesn't want his identity known. He says the culture at Recon Park makes it tough for whistleblowers, and that widespread abuse is no secret in the department.
The people who work know the people who don't, and that conversation's happening all the time.
In fact, Bostock never spent more than a couple hours on the job and did little to hide it. We watched him for 3 days while he checked out real estate, took care of personal business, and spent time at home. What little time he spent at the park, he rarely worked, but he always put in for a full 8-hour shift.
They're stealing from the city. It's that simple.
Isabel Wade is director of the Neighborhood Parks Council, a nonprofit group working to improve San Francisco parks.
We have been told by some senior management people that only about half the people really work even 4 hours a day.
The lost work and salaries add up.
That's about $10 million a year that we're losing.
Up here, there's a VCR. Who knows how long it's been there?
This Dolores Park volunteer says the park is in bad shape and his complaints to the city have gone nowhere.
We have made the supervisors and the superintendents aware of the needs of the park, and nothing's happened. We've been told that there is no mechanism for accountability.
No one was watching these Dolores Park gardeners for the 7 days our cameras rolled. Diane Terrell and Steve Chuknova arrive at work around 5 a.m. and spend the first part of their day locked in this hut. An hour or two into the shift, Terrell exercises, walking around the park. Then she returns to the shed. Chuknova typically takes the cart out and visits with neighbors and police and more neighbors. He also spends hours on the cell phone. This is what we saw day after day after day. Around 9, they head for a local cafe where they spend an hour or more relaxing and making more phone calls. Sometimes they even drive the Cushman down and park it on the sidewalk. They also run errands. Back at the park, they do some work briefly before passing the rest of their shift, much like the morning, visiting or sitting in the shed as the hours roll by. Even though they mostly stayed at the park, Terrell never even worked 1 full hour each day, and Chuck Nova averaged about an hour and a half.
You have a plague. How do you cure it? If it's an epidemic, how do you cure it? Let's get the people out that aren't doing anything.
When we tried to talk to Terrell and Chuck Nova, their boss, Adrian Fields, blocked our camera. He didn't want to speak to us either. This was a rare appearance for Fields. We rarely saw a supervisor at Dolores Park, and neither had the neighbors. But when we showed up at this neighborhood meeting, so did Fields.
Is this one of the guys that works all day long cleaning up the park?
Fields wanted us to know it's the homeless that make the parks look so bad.
The gardeners actually don't get much of a chance to do any gardening. What they're actually doing is cleaning up trash and homeless debris.
But look what happens at Dolores Park. Chuck Nova actually passes his broom and shovels out to the homeless. They do his work while he rests nearby. We showed our tapes to the interim director for the Recreation and Parks Department, Yomi Agunbiade.
Staff should be at work. They are hired to work a certain amount of time, and they should be doing that work.
He was especially concerned about this. As we stood by, Chuck Nova hands plants bought with taxpayer dollars to a neighbor who takes them home and puts them in her own garden. Later, he fills up his own truck, drives home, and unloads everything in his front yard.
It just shouldn't be done. It's public property. It's not something that I would condone at all.
Agunbiade says the department is taking our investigation very seriously, but not all gardeners are slacking off.
Is this a rampant thing that's, that's a cancer in the department that the majority of my gardeners are not doing a full day's work? I would disagree.
And he says the biggest issue facing parks? Budget cuts, not bad gardeners. But at the Neighborhood Parks Council, the biggest taxpayer complaint by far, missing gardeners.
Really starting with getting people to work 8 hours a day, the staff that we do have. Let's see how far that takes us before we run out and cry wolf and say we need more resources.
I'm sort of tired of the blame game. It's his fault, it's his, the kid thing, not me. If it's a problem, can we come up with some solutions?
Late today, park officials told us those 3 gardeners are being placed on unpaid leave for 10 days while they investigate. Now, the question is whether the park officials will go beyond those 3 cases and address some of the widespread problems that we've uncovered. Tonight at 11, we take our surveillance tapes to City Hall. The mayor and the Board of Supervisors are taking quick action on what we've uncovered. For the I-Team, I'm Dan Noyes, ABC 7 News.